What's up? Happy Monday. You're watching Philadelphia Eagles Now by Chat Sports. I'm Chase Sr. No worries. Thomas Mott will be back tomorrow. He's been touring Europe over the last week and change. Been a blast being able to do all of these Philadelphia Eagles videos. And we have an absolutely loaded show coming up on the docket today. So just buckle in and stay tuned. 2022 schedule news, some schedule leaks coming out in advance of the actual schedule being released later this week. We'll take a look at the top free agency targets for Philadelphia following the NFL draft, which includes James Bradberry now officially released by the New York Giants. We'll spend a lot of time on him. As for whether or not Philadelphia is going to sign him, he'd be a very good number 2 cornerback opposite of Darius Slay. And we also have some Philadelphia Eagles trivia, the answer to that trivia question coming up at the end of the show. But first, have to give a shout out to Ray Dittinger, who on 94.1 WIP on Sunday announced that after 50 plus years of covering the Philadelphia Eagles, now a Hall of Famer, he is going to retire from his duties on 94.1 WIP as well as NBC Sports Philadelphia. So to thank him for everything that he's done throughout his classy, legendary career, I want you to hit that thumbs up icon and like the video to support a Philadelphia legend. So many times we throw out the word legend. Ray Dittinger, Diddy, literally is a legend. I remember being at Temple University, myself, Zach Gelb, who now hosts a radio show on CBS Sports Radio, we reached out to him to get him on our radio show on WHIP, which is the student-run radio station at Temple University, and Diddy gave us his home phone number because he refused to get a cell phone. That's how old school this guy is. His reaction to when the Eagles won Super Bowl 52 was incredible. When he was in tears with his son, thinking about his grandparents and his parents. He was at Franklin Field when the Eagles won the 1960 NFL championship game. And the fact that this dude carried his career as long as he did and was as great as he was with class. He was an Eagles encyclopedia, and every time you listened to him, every time you watched him, you learned something about the game of football and the Eagles franchise. Thank you, Ray Diddy. Hit that thumbs up icon to wish him well in retirement. He is going to be missed within the Philadelphia media landscape. As for that trivia question, here it is. Again, the answer revealed later on today's show. Then we'll really start breaking everything down here on Philadelphia Eagles Now on a beautiful Monday. Where did Nick Foles go to college before transferring to Arizona? Hashtag BDN. We know what it stands for. Stick around to get that answer. So this morning I woke up and I saw some schedule leaks from the NFL announcing some of these primetime matchups. This tweet coming from the National Football League. 2 huge matchups on the slate for Monday Night Football in Week 2 this year. They said, stay tuned for the full schedule reveal. It is going to be a Monday Night Football doubleheader, and the Eagles will open up their home slate at Lincoln Financial Field Week 2 against the Minnesota Vikings, a rematch of that NFC Championship game from 2017 when Nick Foles just went off, and Alshon Jeffrey, Torrey Smith, the whole crew just going in, showing up, showing out, and man, what a legendary performance it was that night in South Philadelphia. We get a rematch of that game Week 2 on Monday Night Football. Going to be a good one. And the Eagles schedule release, as well as all teams in the NFL, we will find out their respective schedules later on this week on Thursday. Stay tuned for a full video breakdown here on Philadelphia Eagles Now. That's why you subscribe. Speaking of that matchup, before we get to these free agency targets, who you got? We know one game is official. Eagles type PHI, Minnesota Vikings type MIN. Get your predictions in the comment section right now. We pivot to the top Eagles free agency targets following the NFL draft, and we have to hit on first James Bradberry, cornerback formerly of the New York Giants. He has officially been released as a cap casualty in New York. It's going to save the Giants around $10, $11 million on their salary cap. This was not a bad move by Dave Gettleman back at the time when he was really one of the top cornerback options in the free agency market coming to New York from the Carolina Panthers. But the reason he was let go was because Dave Gettleman made a bunch of other financially irresponsible moves that allowed the Giants, or didn't allow them, to have much money to pay James Bradberry. That's why he is on the chopping block. And according to multiple reports out there, the Eagles looked at as one of the front runners and one of the prime destinations for James Bradberry, who immediately becomes the number 1 cornerback, left as a free agent and could be one of the best number 2 corners in the National Football League, especially if he's paired up with Darius Slay. This coming from Dan Dugan. The Giants releasing James Bradberry after failing to find a trade partner per source. Move creates a lot of money on the salary cap, and all of those savings will come into play as they make it a June 1 cut. So Bradberry in New York. Couple of different players here. 2020, 2021, he was fantastic after that deal. When he was targeted, allowed a completion percentage of 61.5, targets to receptions 91 to 56, which is really, really good. 3 interceptions and 18 pass breakups, which is phenomenal. 587 yards allowed and only 4 touchdowns. But the last 2 years, those numbers have suffered and the production has gone down a little bit for James Bradberry. Now, a couple of reasons for that. His game has gone downhill just a tad, although he's still young, in his late 20s. The Giants' defense was also bad, and they did not have a good pass rush, and that immediately impacts the secondary on the back end. So I'm not sure if James Bradberry can go to a team and be a number 1 cornerback option. But the point here being of this particular conversation is that if the Eagles do sign him, if they bring him in, of course he has some familiarity with the New York Football Giants, but also they need a number 2 cornerback right now. Who's it going to be? I think Avonte Maddox, after signing that contract extension, much better in the slot because of his lack of height. Zech McPherson, solid draft choice a year ago, but none of those players even close to being the outside cornerback of James Bradberry. You're set on the defensive line. The safety spots outside of Eric Wilson, you're going to move forward with Marcus Epps. In that secondary, I love Maddox as a slot. Darius Slay was one of the best corners in the league last year. You solidify that position further with James Bradberry. This Eagles defense goes from being good to even better. So I want to hear from Philadelphia right now in the comments section. Fly, Eagles, fly. Get those Johns in. Type S for sign if you want the Eagles to target him as a free agent right now, or P for pass. Sound off. Let me know down below. Today's show presented to you by our sportsbook partner, BetUS, the best deal that any sportsbook has to offer. Let's be real here. If you go to chatsports.com/EaglesBet and you enter the promo code EAGLES125, you'll get a 125% deposit bonus. Chase, what does that mean? Well, you put in $100. Using that link in that promo code, you get $125 back in additional free money. And if you want to bet on the NBA playoffs, you can do that. How about the Philadelphia 76ers? They were left for dead, dead in the water without Joel Embiid. The first 2 games of that playoff series against the Miami Heat. He comes back 48 hours after we thought the Sixers were cooked. Series is tied 2-2. Sixers going into Game 5 in South Beach as 3-point favorites. Get your bets in by using that link in that promo code. So we move forward with the top Eagles free agency targets following the draft. And let's touch briefly here on Jarvis Landry. According to multiple reports out there, it looks as though he is not going to go back to Cleveland, which I actually thought would have been a great move for him. He's coming off an injury-plagued season a year ago. You get the team up with Deshaun Watson and a couple of other really good weapons on that offense. You know you have that ground game down pat with Nick Chubb, who is excellent, especially picking up yards after contact. And Landry, if he went back to Cleveland, would put up really good production considering the weapons on that offense, and he's playing with Deshaun Watson, who's here, and Baker Mayfield, who's down here. Now, the last 4 years, the production has certainly been there by Landry, as evidenced by the numbers that we talked about, and I think that he's capable of, once again, having one of those very solid seasons. He plays primarily in the slot. He could fit in this Eagles offense. I think the price tag would make Philadelphia and Howie Roseman somewhat hesitant. I think the chances of them signing Jarvis Landry are somewhat low, but a name to keep an eye on for sure as we progress throughout the NFL offseason. A reminder, trivia answer coming up here in a couple of minutes. The answer to that Nick Foles trivia question. Stay tuned for that. We also have 3 more players who we want to break down on this top free agent targets list. We maintain our position at wide receiver. We go to Will Fuller. So Jarvis Landry, primarily a slot guy. Will Fuller, a vertical threat, who anytime he's been on the field has been able to stretch the field vertically. He's been able to take the top off of the defense, which opens up a bunch of underneath routes for tight ends and other wide receivers on some of those crossers. The only problem goes back to what I originally said about Will Fuller. Anytime he's on the field, he's a very good long threat, very good at the long ball, especially tracking it, but this guy is injured year in and year out. If you remember, he had the game-winning catch against Temple University when College Game Day was in Philly back a couple years ago when Deshaun Kaiser threw him that touchdown pass in the corner of the end zone. And he goes into the NFL, starts to make an immediate impact. He was very good with Deshaun Watson, an excellent long ball threat. But again, it's always a soft tissue injury that's creeping up on Will Fuller, whether it be a calf, whether it be a hammy, and he just cannot stay on the field consistently. And when you look at this Eagles receiving core right now, they bulked it up. They have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. Quez Watkins going to be a very good number 3. You have Dallas Goedert in this passing game at that tight end spot. I think he's due for a breakout campaign. Jalen Reagor right now is on the outside looking in, so would there be room for Will Fuller? The skill set, I like it. The injuries, I don't like it. That's why I'm out on Will Fuller. A reminder to subscribe to Philadelphia Eagles Now by Chat Sports as we continue to close in on another milestone here on the channel. We are closing in on 30,000 subscribers. So if you want the best, most interactive, most informative, and entertaining Eagles news and rumors coverage right here on the entire internet, just hit that red subscribe button down below or plug in that link and let this video roll, youtube.com/Eagles Now. From offense to defense. We talked about one defensive player earlier in James Bradberry after the news of him being cut. Trey Flowers, defensive lineman. I'm always down to add defensive line depth. I think that's a really good way to build your football team, and that's been a priority for Howie Roseman and the crew. Anytime that you can rotate in and out defensive linemen to keep guys fresh, to get after opposing quarterbacks in today's pass-happy NFL, I think it's a very smart team-building philosophy. The Eagles' defensive line depth chart, when you look at it, right now is very stacked, but they could use a little bit of depth, and Trey Flowers could certainly give them that. Brandon Graham, Javon Hargrave, Fletcher Cox, Josh Sweat. You now have Jordan Davis, but outside of that, the depth along the defensive line, especially at that edge rusher spot, is a little bit thin. I like Trey Flowers because he's an accomplished player. Last year, he honestly didn't do much. 24 tackles, a sack and a half, 1 tackle for loss, 1 forced fumble, and 1 fumble forced. Has dealt with some nagging injuries over time, but as a guy who you can rotate in and out of that defensive line rotation, maybe he plays a little bit outside, plays a little bit inside. I don't hate it, and I think because he's at this point of his NFL career, he won't cost that much either. And keep in mind, these guys are available at this point in the NFL offseason for a reason. Rate the Eagles defense for me in the comment section. I'm curious and I'm honest how good you think this Eagles defense is. Scale it for me from 1 to 100. 1, worst in the NFL. 100, very, very elite. I like the starters along the defensive line. I think Nakobe Dean's going to be an immediate starter on this Eagles defense. We'll see what happens opposite of Darius Slay. Safety spots, somewhat of a question mark. The offense is great, but scale the defense for me in the comment section. As for the trivia answer, did you know that Nick Foles, before going to Arizona, which is where the Eagles drafted him out of, went to Michigan State? He was actually there at the time with Kirk Cousins. Nick Foles had a legendary Texas high school football career, went to Michigan State, wasn't getting a lot of tick, wasn't getting a lot of run, transferred to Arizona, had a very good career there in the Pac-12. That's where Philadelphia noticed him and Andy Reid at the time and had a very good career. That's what then led to him getting drafted by Philadelphia. Then he became Big Dick Nick and a Super Bowl MVP. Okay, one guy left to get to on the top free agency targets list for Philly, Jadeveon Clowney. So we stay here on the defensive line because Clowney is a much better player than Trey Flowers, and he could really do some work and cause some havoc on this defensive line, playing with some of the players that are currently on this roster, in a Hargrave, in a Fletcher Cox, in a Jordan Davis. You can't double team anybody if you bring in Clowney on this defensive line. They'd really be able to get after it, pin their ears back, and hopefully Jonathan Gannon wouldn't be so vanilla with his defensive scheme like he was for much of the year last year. He could have an uptick in just intensity and getting after the quarterback with some more blitz packages. But honestly, you might not have to draw up a bunch of blitz packages because you might be able to get home with only 4 down linemen. Now, sack numbers have never been there for Clowney. But last year, he was really, really good. Arguably, had one of the best years of his career playing on the opposite side, from Myles Garrett. Jadeveon Clowney was fantastic. I mean, 27 tackles and had 9 sacks. He's never been a double-digit sack guy, which is crazy considering he was a number 1 overall pick with the Houston Texans. I look at him and his sack numbers, kind of like what we've seen from Brandon Graham. Brandon Graham, over time, throughout his career, has been one of the best edge rushers in the sport. But if you look at his statistical breakdown, he's never a big sack guy, right? Nor is Jadeveon Clowney. What are they good at, though? Just getting after the quarterback, getting quarterback pressures and quarterback hits. And over time, that wears down opposing quarterbacks, makes them flustered in the pocket, which then paves the way for them making some mistakes and just not being that same guy. Clowney, Brandon Graham, not huge sack numbers, but they get after the quarterback and they're able to generate a lot of pressure. That is very important. And I think Clowney, even though he's been in the league for a hot minute, he could still be a very good pass rusher in the National Football League. And honestly, if you can get him at a bargain discount, I'd like the signing for the Eagles. No question about that. Before we hop on out of here, another reminder to subscribe to the channel. The Mott Man will be back. Hashtag Where's Mott. Get it into the comment section, and I'll appear here on the channel from time to time. Absolutely love it. Repping the 610, the 484, and the 215. Thanks for watching today's show. Talk to you next time.